It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
There's the smile. Gets them every time. Now we know we have a good guest, and we do have a good guest. I'm going to introduce him momentarily. But of course, I want to welcome you, the listener, back to another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. We're back for year 3. This is the beginning. We had a little break last week, took a couple weeks off. Now we're back, and we're starting strong. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me usually, setting up for the disappointment, is our other co-host, Bryce Johnson, or other host, Bryce Johnson. Unfortunately, Bryce could not be here today. Members of the other side already know that a few weeks back, Bryce's father passed away. So he's doing good. We love him. We miss him today, but he had to go take care of some family stuff, but he will be back next week with us, and we love you, Bryce. Our hearts go out to you. We really miss you today, especially because the high strangeness that I picked for later in the episode, boy, oh boy, would you have some insight in on it, Bryce. So we love you. We'll see you next week. With me always is your super producer,
Riley Bray.
And I'm going to bring in our amazing guest. He's an actor, a comedian, and a podcaster. You know him from his amazing podcast, Superego, James Bonding, Pistol Shrimps Radio, and Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, as well as appearances on shows like Drunk History, Comedy Bang Bang, and Community, and so much more. It is a genuine pleasure to introduce you all today to Mr. Matt Gourley. What's up? Whoa, he's growling with
I'm a Bigfoot.
Yeah, it was good.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for being on the show.
I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm sure your listeners probably know this, but the journey up here into the mountains is this most amazing. It's the most beautiful, amazing place in studio. I may never leave.
They don't
You're
really.
welcome to stay.
We talk about being in the canyon. We don't say which one.
Yeah.
But
Grand Canyon.
Exactly.
exactly.
Yes, at the very bottom.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when people need to use the restroom, we send them to that big building that overlooks with the glass floor.
Right.
Yeah, and we
That's
put
just really
Franks
fun.
and beans in our flashlight, and that's what we eat. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, we really do need. We've been talking about doing something out at like Shaver Lake for so long. We really do need to do an on-location episode where we're out in the woods someplace.
Good idea.
That would be really fun.
Late at night, campfire sounds.
Yeah. Instead of just putting them in after the fact.
We do a fake version of that over on our Patreon, BCC The Other Side. But yeah, have you been to the Grand Canyon? Have you ever been there?
I apparently was there as a baby.
Oh,
And I don't remember it, but I've never been since.
that's like when you're like when your parents take you to Disney World when you're like 2.
Yeah.
and you have no memory of it.
Yeah.
What's the point?
My memory is them telling me about it.
Right.
They own my memories.
They
It's
do.
not right.
Parents own at least 4 years of your memories.
Yeah.
And then what happens when they forget them?
That's my intellectual property. Cease and desist, Mom.
You grew up in California, correct?
Yes, born and raised.
In Whittier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What was there any let's talk about your personal paranormal history if you have such a thing. Was there any local folklore in Whittier? Like, was there any haunted houses or legends, urban legends? Was there any, like, monster from Whittier, California? I mean, it's a pretty...
Richard Nixon.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't know Nixon was from Whittier.
He was born in Yorba Linda, but he was raised in Whittier, and then he went to college there, and that's where he met his wife. The only musical he ever did was with Pat Nixon, that's how he met her.
What was his,
Wait, what? I didn't know that
musical?
story.
Yeah, I don't remember what the musical is, but...
7 Brides for 7 Brothers.
I'd like to see Nixon in South Pacific.
Yeah. There's nothing like the tame.
Exactly.
I would.
In the world.
God, give me a time machine. Hitler, you can live.
Yeah. I got one trip in the time machine. I'm seeing Pat and Dickie doing their doing a wash that man right out of my hair.
There is not that I can think of any Whittier like folklore or supernatural stories. I'm determined to be your best guest that has no supernatural history whatsoever. Really? Okay.
Yeah. We've had some, but we always have a delightful time.
Yeah.
I was at a party last night. I was talking to you guys before we started recording, and with a friend. He's turned 40th. It was a Halloween thing. I know by the time you guys hear this, who cares about Halloween anymore? By the way, sidebar, we had to go in costume, which I'm really lazy about. And I did what I thought was a total phone-in. This is a group of friends where we actually get together and quote-unquote ironically watch The Bachelor.
Right.
But we're really into it.
I've been involved with that in the past, too. That sort of thing.
So I was like, well, I'll go as The Bachelor. I just put on my suit and then bought a dozen roses and just handed the roses out. I'm telling you, it was a hit.
It killed.
It crushed. And there were good costumes there, and everyone's like, you have the best costume. I was like, this is the easiest thing I've ever done. But I brought up the party because my friend's dad was there, and he was telling me about how he had recently had like massive heart surgery. There was something, I forget what the condition was, but like the membrane around his heart started like filling up with fluids and constricting his heart. So he had to have this massive surgery. And he said in the recovery, he was in the hospital. He ended up being in the hospital for like a month. But the week after surgery, he said something went really wrong. And he was like, I pretty much was dying, and I could sense myself dying. And I was like, what happened? He goes, well, you know that thing about the light at the end of the tunnel? That totally happens. He was like, I was there, and all of a sudden I could start seeing these lights, and I knew that's when something was going wrong. And then he's like, I saw like my vision tunneled, and I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. And then I could hear voices around me. He said it was the people, you know, the nurses and the doctors freaking out. And they saved his life, obviously. But I was like, did you see anything on the other side? He's like, no, there was no like family or loved ones. He's like, but what they say happens is true, at least with that light at the end of the tunnel. He's like, I didn't get too close to it. But he said, the way he described it, he was like, he was out of his body experiencing this whole thing. So it's always fascinating when you hear those kind of stories.
Yeah.
I mean, they're frightening for an obvious reason. But then it's like these guys are like people like get that closer a little bit, like astronauts, just like shooting out, getting a close look, and then coming back down to Earth. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I thought I read something about even like a scientific basis for that sort of thing, that your brain, when it comes close to death, goes into like throes of endorphins or something like that. That's kind of like almost purposefully putting you into a shock state.
Yes.
That probably could alter your brain into like that kind of, whether it's real or not, or hallucination, or just a coping thing. I don't know.
Well, he said, this was fascinating. He was like, he's kind of come back, and he's like, I'm kind of a changed man now. He's like, the thing I can tell you is there's nothing to fear. He said he felt like his body was floating in warm water. And it was very comforting. He was aware that it was happening, but he wasn't terrified, but he could tell, he was conscious of like, oh, this is going not the way it's supposed to, and I am dying. He's like, but it was very comforting. And they say they release at birth and death, and we've talked about it on the show, that your brain releases a gush of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the chemical in your brain that's produced in the pineal gland, they believe. And that's the stuff that, like, when you do ayahuasca or you can smoke DMT, they say you like go to other realms and see like other dimensions and stuff. So I think that could be what's happening.
It's nice to know, though, like if you're either traveling to the great beyond or going nowhere, your body's taking care of you and make sure your last moments are comfortable and good. Yeah.
No, it does seem like the brain going into like a protect mode, or like a self-soothe, like it's built into so you don't have to have the shock so bad. But yeah, you wonder, is it just the brain comforting itself, or is it the brain opening up to accessing something?
Right,
else?
like, okay,
guess what,
now
we're
we
all
know.
gonna find out one day.
Yeah,
that's right.
Isn't that terrifying? Are you scared of death, Matt?
I'm not, but I think if I sat there and thought about it, I would be.
Yeah,
You could get yourself scared.
Yeah,
of death.
it still feels.
Let's just sit
like
here and
knock
get
on wood
ourselves
far
freaked
enough
out
away.
about dying.
I know. Turn the lights off.
Yeah, I do have that thing where, sometimes, especially when I'm stressed, I'll like wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, I'm gonna die one day, and it's knowing. It's kind of like what my friend's dad was going through. It's knowing that it's the thing that freaks me out, I think, is like being aware of it happening while it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's just like a thing. It's like that weird rite of passage, the final passage.
I'm almost more afraid of the slow decline to death. Like having, like ill members of my family watching what they go through. Yeah. And that just feels depressing. But I do have there's part of me that's kind of excited about the last second, this kind of thing that this guy was talking about. And I'm not like a real afterlife believer, but that's not to say that I don't think there could be something. I guess I'm kind of agnostic in that sense. So there's part of me that's actually excited because one thing I feel relatively sure of is whatever it is, we can't even conceive of it now. So it's not worth like preaching about or any of that stuff, but just but there is part of me that's like, what if I get to heaven and heaven is every version of my favorite movie that was supposed to be made that never got made on a shelf that you can just watch all these alternate versions of movies, or you just look through history's mysteries and go, oh, that's what happened there. That's what happened there. Whatever it is, like, even if that's not the reality of it, there's some like virtual world that's tailored to us individually. So that would be my desire, and so that's what you get. And even if you're hallucinating, like your brain's releasing chemicals, and who cares, it's still real to you,
I think about that too. Just like, what if the afterlife is just a complete command over your own reality, and it is like a personal heaven? I think about that all the time. Like, and I love that idea of like the films that were never made, or like all that you get. I mean, it's arguable that if there is something on the other side, if there is a higher dimension, then if we still have access to this dimension, the way that, let's say, angels or ghosts do, or family members that have crossed over, and people say, I'm getting messages from my mother or father on the other side, then if there is like a multiverse, then it's possible that maybe it's like a hub to all the other alternate dimensions, and we can look at all that stuff too. Maybe that's where we get... what's a movie that you wish it was made that was never
David
made?
Lynch was originally supposed to direct Return of the Jedi.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So I want to see that. God, if you're listening, I'd like that heaven prepared for me when I arrive.
He's just like, well, just walk through this multi-dimensional doorway and you'll get to go to that reality and view that reality. Man, I just got off on a huge Lynch kick. I finally finished Twin Peaks
I've never seen it.
Oh, man, you got to watch it.
I know.
I haven't done the new season
I
yet.
loved The Return probably more than the original show.
Wow.
I'm sure a lot of people thought it was weird, but...
everybody I talked to liked it.
Okay, good. Because, I'm watching it after everybody, so... but, I don't know. Riley, what do you think about... When you think of heaven, what do you think about?
I don't. I don't think heaven's a thing, really, personally. But I think it's way more abstracted than that. I do kind of think that's the dissolution of the ego. Like, I think that goes. I'm not planning on being me.
Wouldn't that be
after
nice?
I die?
Yeah,
it is. Yes,
that feels in a way, I'm liberating to me. I've had enough of me.
Yeah, and I'm sure you all also have. So let's move on from this one.
Agreed.
But I think of it that way, kind of more return to the source, like it's just borrowed energy, borrowed spirit. That's part of like this bigger spirit, and it returns to the ether or whatever it is, the big lake of spirit, and then it comes back out and drops of people.
So
again.
do you believe that there's like a collective consciousness on the other side? I mean, for lack of a better, are you part of something? Are you self-aware even though your ego is dissipated?
I think yes, but not in a way we could comprehend. Like, I think the universe is probably conscious, like, but we just can't understand that.
Right.
And you just return to that. Consciousness.
That's sort of the thing I always come back to, is whatever it is by definition we can't conceive of it, because it's just, otherwise we would truly have a sense. And I don't mean like organized Sunday religion version of heaven. There would be some scientific sense of what an afterlife is, and there's literally nothing, right? So it must be something that we can't wrap our heads around if it's there. And that's exciting.
It's like the speed of light or entering a black hole. It's just like a threshold that we can't cross. It's just we're not made to do that.
There was a fly trapped in my bathroom yesterday, and it was one of those things where I don't want to kill the fly. I try not to kill bugs. I mean, I eat hamburgers, so I know that there's some cognitive dissonance there. But
but you don't eat fly burgers.
I don't eat fly burgers. That's for sure.
It's not a monster.
No.
But fly burger. But so I was like, well, what I'll do is I'll shut the bathroom door because I was in there shaving, and then I open up my little window and with the screen, and then I kind of cracked the screen open. And it was flying towards the window, and it landed on the screen. I was trying to help it through, and then it would fly over to the other side of the bathroom. And I was like, I'm trying to help this fly.
Yeah.
And it has no idea what's happening in its reality. You know what I mean? Like, it's only just being a fly.
Yeah.
But it made me think, like, what forces outside of ourselves are constantly trying to communicate with us, constantly trying to help us. It's like, fucker, I am trying to get you. Are trapped in the bathroom. You are going to die here, or another person's going to come along and swat you. I am trying to get you to where you need to be, but I have no way to communicate with you.
Yeah.
And you have no way you don't even know that I'm here.
I feel this way when I take my cat to the vet, and she's in her little carrier just looking at me like, you bastard.
Yeah.
I loved you, and now I hate you. And I'm like speaking English to her, going, you don't understand. This is for your own good. This will keep you around longer. We can be together longer. And there's nothing. She just is just fear and anger in her.
But that's what I think we do. I mean, I'd like to believe, and I we go through a bunch of different stories and history, theories and cryptids and ghosts and stuff on this show. But I tend to be like you, Matt, where I'm kind of agnostic at the end of the day. I'm like, we don't know, we're not going to know. But I do I personalize it a little bit that way, where I think, if there are aliens, if there's a god or gods or some other force beyond life, it must be some version of that where we just can't comprehend it because we are only built with the body that we have and our ability to, our five senses and our ability to experience this reality in a very narrow tube, really.
Yeah.
There's God, so if there is something there, I think it's trying to help us, but it's just so hard.
Interesting. I love that. I go to bed thinking about that kind of thing a lot. And this thing from Carl Sagan always resonates with me, that like science is all great and wonderful, and he's not being, facetious, but just as important as imagination. So I almost like to think about this stuff in like a sci-fi sense or like a writer's sense, and that knowing that a lot of the best theories of physics and stuff kind of come out of dreaming or daydreaming or just imagination. And then I start to think about that stuff too, where it's just, if they were trying, it's not that like they're necessarily maybe that they're trying, but yeah, we don't possess certain senses. We even know like cats can smell way more than we can. There could be a dimension we don't smell, or like an ultrasonic or ultraviolet or something like that. And that stuff fascinates me to no end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, it's big stuff. Big stuff. So growing up, were you raised religious at all?
It's funny, no. And then later in life, my family got very religious.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of like the opposite.
Like what happened?
I'm not really sure. I'm still wondering.
What happened there?
And it happened piecemeal throughout. So it's kind of like my mom, and then my mom met my stepdad at a church. And that happened, and then my sister met her husband, and then they kind of both got religious.
Or what kind of religious are we talking
Evangelical
about?
Christianity.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's like a big swing.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
That's as big a swing as you can swing, I think.
Is it, look, I'm not going to trash anybody's religion, but like, it must feel like, because usually you hear about it happening in reverse. We're like, we were religious, then my mother or father became disenchanted with the stuff, and we kind of dropped out of it. I would imagine it has to be almost like watching family members join a cult.
It felt that way, yeah. And like, I think if we had some tension for a few years, I used to think that it was kind of the judgmental element of the church. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized I was bringing a lot of that distance myself, if not more, out of like a kind of like preemptive sort of expectation of that kind of thing. And my family, as religious as they are not the type to judge.
Right.
And they put people first. I had some real issues with it, but I realized that was more on me. And now we're as thick as thieves. They're still very religious, and I'm not at all. And it just really doesn't factor as much anymore. So, but it was a long road. And again, I think that was me taking that road more than them. I think for the most part, we're kind of sitting there going like, what? Nothing's changed. Yeah. We still love you.
It's not like when you go visit, they slide a pamphlet under the door.
No, there was a couple of
like,
those
you found a Bible
moments.
on the bed. You're like,
even more direct. And,
oh, wow.
And I have to admit, I was pretty like, nope.
Yeah.
Come on. You know me before. I'm grandfather Dane. You can't try to do this.
By the way, Mom, I'd like those memories back, please.
Come on.
You don't have the rights to those.
That's an interesting perspective. That's a good point, because I think a lot of the people that aren't Christian feel that, where they're like, oh, I'm being judged by them. And so you preempt, and you are actually then being the judgmental one.
Yeah.
Because there's something about that divide, though, of people being like, oh, you believe I'm like going to burn in hell. Like, right. And we can all be friends. And a lot of Christians don't believe that. But when that fundamental wall, I think, makes people that are non-believers like put up that guard.
Yeah.
And it's a weird tension to work through. But.
It is. And especially when it's just in your immediate family.
Right.
It was weird for a while, but we got through it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like your perspective
that's nice.
on it.
It's tough because like I've even like dated people who are, I'm like, oh, they go to church every Sunday. And I'm like, oh, this relationship's not going to work. You know, like, I mean, meet somebody at your church, which I think the one I'm thinking of, she did. You know, it's like, but it is funny because I'm not really hard. Like I said, I'm agnostic. I was raised Presbyterian. My dad didn't go to church. He was a lapsed Catholic. My mom is very non-judgmental. You know, she's very involved with her church, but it was never like a Bible beating house. And she also was very open to ideas. You know, if she disagreed with a concept, because I would often bring these sort of like sci-fi things to her. Like, for example, like, Mom, do you think Bigfoot's the missing link? You know, like, is he maybe between like, you know, because I was always trying to unpack like evolution and the Garden of Eden. And she'd say no, but then she'd also say, but the Garden of Eden is just a story. It's just a parable. Adam and Eve are just symbols. And I'd be like, oh, cool. So it was nice that I grew up in a house where my mom does believe in God. She thinks Jesus is the living embodiment of God. And but she's able to
not literalist.
She's not a literalist, which was very good, I think, for me, because I struggled with anxiety about God watching me and heaven and hell and all that stuff. And after being years in therapy, I now realize, like, oh, those were some early signs of obsessive thinking.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is a correlation, because I didn't have any of that growing up, and I never had that kind of worry that I was being watched or judged or would be punished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had real trouble with God being able to read my brain.
I think my wife has some of that because she grew up Catholic.
And so I would, of course, think of horrible things.
Yeah.
Like, no.
And I'm like, oh God, no God. Like, I remember I developed this like obsessive thought when this lasted way too long. This is also like, clearly didn't live in a household where I felt comfortable enough to share this information with my parents, you know? So I could have gotten some help, but I would be going to sleep and I'd be like, fuck you, God, 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 fuck you, God. And I was like, no, I don't mean it. I don't mean it. And I would cry because I'm like, I'm going to go to hell.
Oh my God.
I'm saying, fuck you.
You know what? I hear that and I bet that's way more common than you think.
Yeah.
Because what's the natural response to having that kind of like dull oppression every day?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of cloud. Yeah.
And then I think I got through it eventually because I was like, look, and there's all things that like a second grader does not need to unpack.
Yeah.
But I was like, look, Michael, if God exists,
Sweating.
then he created
the mirror.
He created your brain. He understands how brains work, and he knows that this isn't how you really think.
That's a strong point.
So don't worry about it. And it was kind of like I got to that point, and then that vanished.
That's nice. Oh.
But it was rough there for a while.
I should mention that I dabbled very briefly with Christianity myself. In many ways, I was kind of an earlier one in my family when I was a senior in high school.
You got them all into it.
Well, yeah, no, I will not take that blame. But I had just enough, and I call it my like vaccination of Christianity, where I dabbled just enough, didn't like it, and I was like, okay, that ain't gonna take.
Well, how that happen, and what drew you to it?
I think a couple friends in high school brought me to some function, and you get saved, and then they were doing it, so it was just, I guess, a sort of like go with the flow kind of thing, and then it carried over to my first year in college, and I ended up doing a Bible. I wasn't running the Bible study, but being part of a Bible study with this campus Christian group, and it just didn't take long before I realized, like, this is weird. And then one of the guys, it was almost like a bait and switch. He's like, well, now that you're coming to Bible study, I've got to go off to a mission in Korea. I'm going to hand you over to Tony. And Tony was this militant, like, creepo.
Whoa.
Where at one time he had me over his house for like a Bible study, and we sat on a couch smaller than this, like a love seat, and his wife was on I was in the middle, and they were on either side of me, and they were both just sort of looking at me, and he goes, my wife and I never even kissed before we got married. And I don't know what his point was, but it was like psychosexual.
Someone was like, a unicorn.
Do you want to kiss my wife? Do you?
She's never been kissed. And I remember like getting out of there in much the same way like you would in the movie Aliens, like, go, get behind me.
There's like acid dripping through the ceiling.
And I ditched him, and I never looked back. One day on campus, I like was walking, and I hear Matt, and it's like the crowd literally kind of parted, and there he was sitting at like a cafe table, and I was just
staring
like,
at your ass.
Yeah, he was I wonder what happened to that
Tony,
guy.
Where's Tony now?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I bet there'd be some fun surprises when you find out.
I know. I wonder if I could ever remember his last name.
Oh,
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember they fired my favorite Sunday school teacher because she was too hip. And because it was cool. Like our Sunday school study would just be like,
that's a Supreme Court case.
Yeah,
right.
They were like, we would go, and she'd like be like, so my neighbor's kid threw a party this weekend, and the cops had to come, and she was like, do you guys ever do that? Like, she wasn't like trying to be like, do you guys like to drink? She was just like, they lied to their parents, and their parents got really upset. And, there was a bunch of, they trashed their yard, and she's like, the house was a mess. And she would like take like real world things and not even necessarily bring up God or Jesus, but we would just kind of like unpack, like, yeah, is it worth lying to your parents about? There was like a real world application to a lot of this
pretty
stuff.
practical and
like really
constructive.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool because then you'd be like, oh yeah, and then you got to hear about everybody else's like opinions on, well, I don't think it's a big deal if you like drink, but or this or that, and it wasn't like she was collecting information on anybody. This wasn't like
We're just trying to establish a trusting dialogue with the youth.
Yeah, and it was just kind
so
of
they fired her, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we would come in every Sunday and just kind of talk about real stuff. I was like, this is kind of cool. It was almost like just teenage group therapy in a way.
Yeah.
And they fired her. And then I was like, Mom, I'm never going back to church again. She's like, okay.
How nice.
She's like, all right, I can't force you. I was like, I'm done. Every now and then she'd be like, oh, we should. I'll be like, no.
Yeah, I opted out in 5th grade. My parents tried to send me to a Christian school, and I went for most of the year, and I just like hated it. I hated it. And like I remember telling her we'd have these assemblies where we'd like sing the songs. And I was like, I feel like they're brainwashing me. Like everyone like gets together and they sing these songs, and like nobody even really knows what they mean, and we all just sing them, and it's weird. And then the final straw for me was they like did the thing where you accepted Christ as your savior, and one by one they like brought us into a back room with like this priest, and you would like accept Jesus. And I was like, this feels like some sort of coerced like gulag or something. It's weird.
It is,
like,
right?
This is really weird.
I mean, we forget that, in suburban America, all over, there's just like, there are, churches are basically just like, places of ritual, know, and a lot of these are like old occult, like, going back 2,000, years and plus. Just
but I'm down with the occult. Give me some occult ritual.
I know, but it is but it's
that
just,
I would have been.
At least they got some style.
I know, but it is funny that if you just like swap out the costumes and a cross for like a goat head, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay,
this is sick.
Oh yeah,
this is
Christianity's
evil.
no less weird than Scientology in my eyes. I mean, they have all got some. I mean, at least Scientology's got a sci-fi element. I'll say that about it. I mean, I find that a little bit interesting. But that's whatever the old quote is. Like the only difference between a religion and a cult is 100 years.
Right.
Yeah. Like just old.
I know. It's so fascinating to me that, but people are just take it for granted. But I remember sitting in church and being like, Holy Ghost. I want to talk more about that ghost.
Yeah.
What's up with that ghost?
Yeah.
What is the Holy Ghost? Can we talk? Like, I hear a lot about Jesus and God, but what's the Holy Ghost? Like, I wanted that stuff.
Yeah.
We talking white sheet or?
Yeah. I would always
abstract?
think. I was just pictured like Jesus, God, and then a dude in a white sheet, like hanging out in between them.
You should start a church that's like just the Holy Ghost, like a spin-off.
That would be
that.
rad. It's just Halloween themed all year round.
God and Jesus are kind of they're a little corporate. I'm kind of going to do my own thing here. What am I? I don't know. Let's find out together.
Yeah, let's
take a peek under the sheet.
That's the slogan for the Church of the Holy
take
Ghost.
Take a peek under the sheet.
Yeah, I don't know. So did you have any fascination? Like, you're a sci-fi guy. I know you're a Star Wars fan, like me, because we've had conversations about the vintage Kenner figures before.
I could talk all night.
A reminder, Bigfoot Collectors Club, it's in the DNA of the show. I think some people sometimes get upset when we diverge and start talking about toys and stuff, and I'm like, this is kind of how we used to have a Collector's Corner segment.
Not entirely a paranormal
No, it's not. No, there's still a
also
little...
toys.
Look, I have a spiritual connection to those toys.
Yes,
Does that do anything?
Yeah. So, you big pop culture guy.
Yeah.
What were horror films, ghosts, Bigfoot? Did any of that play a role in your life?
Well, horror films hugely. I was sort of sat down by my babysitter and my sister when I was about 4 or 6, 5 to watch Halloween with the lights off.
Whoa.
That's young.
I've told this story before, so just that's it in a nutshell, and it just fried me. I still have trauma to this day. I don't sleep well. I'm doing a podcast currently with Paul Rust called In Myers We Trust with Gourley and Rust. Well, it's Geyers and Rust.
I need to listen to that.
And it's like a deep dive on the Halloween series.
Cool.
And I just, that has stayed with me for my life. And I'm not afraid of it consciously as an adult anymore, but subconsciously and recurring nightmares occasionally.
How did the nightmares originally manifest themselves? Like,
it's always been the same, that I'm running from Michael Myers, often in the house where I was born and raised that my mother still lives in, which is like a 50s tract home, as middle class as you could possibly be. And it has this circle in the house where if you go through my room, which had 2 doors, to the back hallway, to the living room, to the front entryway, you could run in a circle. And I just had this dream where he was just chasing me over and over. Whoa. My mom too, and like the only way for me to leave was to kind of leave my mom behind. So there was like a kind of emotional element to it too, and just like followed me all these many years. Whoa. And I still kind of wake up around 20 minutes in every night, kind of like checking to make sure I'm safe, and I don't sleep well. It's horrible.
Well, join the club, man.
It goes back to that.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
that would have fucked me up, because that movie for me was E.T. I was fascinated with E.T.
But
also,
it frightened you?
As soon as the sun went down, I was like, E.T.'s gonna look at me through my window. I was terrified. I had recurring
night for that.
I know. Well, I don't know why.
Instead of Michael Myers, I'll trade you boogeyman.
Yeah, right.
Like a sweet alien.
But he became a boogeyman. It was like almost like we would play in the wood, because I grew up right next to the woods, and it's like E.T. and I would hang out in the woods, and then I would go home for the night. And I'd be like, okay, here's the deal: stay in the woods. Do not look at my window because it scares me. And he'd be like, okay. And then I'd go to bed and I'd look over and E.T. would just be staring at me wide-eyed through the window, and it would wake me up. It was that.
I lied.
It was the lack of trust. And his like
what can you do, Michael?
That makes me feel
I'll be right here every night.
That makes me feel like there's a cold snake going up through my throat right now.
I just picture like the group therapy between Michael and E.T. about the breached trust.
It's like the 4 of us in a room.
Yeah, Michael Myers just standing there with a knife, sitting there with a knife quietly.
Even that image gets me.
I know.
I actually think I have that movie to thank, or I don't even know, blame for my skepticism and kind of like dive into science and rationalities.
Oh, because you had to force yourself to be a skeptic.
Yeah. So that great fear was so steeped in me that this was also in the like last throes of the Cold War, so I was very conscious that a nuclear bomb could go off at any point, because there was also like that movie the day after was on TV.
Lawrence, Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, not far from where I grew up.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And and then growing up in Whittier, we had a really big earthquake when I was, I think, 15.
Okay.
It was super scary. And so those three things were kind of these like my big fears. Like there were three things that I had no say in. I couldn't control. They could come for me at any time. Obviously not Michael Myers, but the idea of that, like a slasher coming to the suburbs. And so I remember being at school one day and the earthquake had just happened and people were like, did you hear Nostradamus predicted this? And he predicted that another one's coming like May 31st. Just all that kind of like bullshit gossip. And it just petrified me, and I decided, like, okay, I gotta look into this. So I started reading about it, and I started reading about like the desire for people to kind of put patterns on things and believe in things and look for order and see faces in the wilderness as a kind of like hardwired survival mechanism. And I started to understand, like, you can't control this stuff because of science, but you can at least understand it, and that like was somehow a great comfort for me,
right?
And that's just kind of what put me on whatever path this is. You know, it's not
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me, too, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, and I don't want to give anybody any ideas here, but it is it is fascinating that of all the horrors in this world that have come true, that there aren't more people putting on Halloween masks and going on slashing rampages in real life. You know, you feel like that's something that people would actually
They even do it in the movies. Like there's one Friday the 13th movie that's completely a copycat killer.
Yes.
That's a spoiler for part 5.
Yeah,
it's a shitty chapter in
5,
the film.
right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing is like
and Halloween. It happens in Halloween.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. There are obviously serial killers are real, but you don't like the Scream guy, you know what I mean? Like that you feel like that would happen. That would actually be happening more.
I know. Just to throw that out there, it does and is like all the time. Like there's so many, like the shootings.
Yeah.
Are
well,
that's like that's crazy.
No, I know that
out of control.
I'm just saying in terms of literally putting on like a costume.
You're talking about more stylized.
Yeah. Stylized like copycat killers are like, I am gonna put on a Jason mask, you know, hockey mask.
Yeah, if I were killed by a copycat killer wearing a Michael Myers mask, I don't. I mean, I die. I'm getting killed, right? That's the concept here. But I would die.
You're like, stop right there.
I'll do it for you.
I will just lay down and go right now.
Every Halloween, I go to South Pasadena with my wife because it's just this kind of like fun family area where there's like all these haunted houses. But it's where the Michael Myers house from the movie is located. Oh. So all these different Michael Myers come and like descend on this house, and they're like tall, short, fat, skinny, and they're all just kind of like it's comical, and they circle each other, and they're kind of like getting off on it themselves. They don't speak, and they just kind of stare at you and tilt their heads.
Yeah.
And I sit there like a kid who doesn't know whether to be afraid or
it's like immersion therapy.
That you subject yourself to this every year?
Generally, yeah, because it feels like a way where I could do it on my terms.
Yes,
and it's fun, but there is part of me that's like, I kind of need this.
Like, legit.
Well, it clearly manifested a fascination if you've watched all these films.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to return to the movies and watch them between ages 5 and what? When did you go back and watch?
I think about it was probably a good 10 years, and by then I had nightmare envisioned so much of the movie, because I also half didn't see the movie because I was too afraid, so I would leave the room, but the rest of the house was dark, so I sat in the doorway and listened to a lot of it. So a lot of it was like a made-up version. Then when I saw it, I'm like, well, where's the scene where they're all, you know, like bloody on the stairs? And that didn't happen.
Right.
But it did in my mind.
Yes. You went and wrote the rest of the movie, filled in what was happening with those sounds.
And the first movie's not gory at all. You barely see any blood, but in my mind, because like I'd also seen the trailer for The Shining where the elevator opens up and the blood pours out.
That gave me nightmares.
It was all conflated.
That gave me nightmares, and I saw it when I was 18.
You know what's funny about that trailer? They weren't allowed to show blood in trailers when that came out. So Kubrick said that it was rusty water to the ratings board. And they were like, oh, well, I guess you can do that then.
I saw that in the theater. We went with my parents and saw the movie Going in Style with George Burns, Art Carney, and Lee Strasberg, like 3 old people that rob a bank, which they remade recently with like Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
Alan Arkin, I think.
Yes.
But I saw that in the theater, and like, we're going to see this lighthearted bank robbery comedy heist movie of old people, and there's an elevator, just blood and that music, and I'm a kid in a movie theater, and I just remember going like, I shouldn't be seeing this. Anybody gonna help me out here?
That happened to my nephew not too long ago. They went to go see a film at Alamo Drafthouse. He's older now, but this is maybe 5 years ago. He's about 10 years old, and they showed a preview for The Shining before this movie because it was part of their like Halloween horror fest, and they were seeing something completely unrelated, and it gave my nephew horrendous nightmares. And the next time we went to the movie, he's like, can we go around that time? He was like, can we go outside just in case they show that Shining trailer?
Oh, that breaks my heart. It truly does.
Because that was the worst. That was the worst. When I was a kid, I would always have an anxiety attack going to a movie because I was like, what previews are we going to see? And my dad would be like, cover your eyes. And he'd like put his
do
giant
that voice?
hands.
That's worse.
I know. Well, that's just always how he sounded to me. I mean, he just always sounded to me.
Michael, I love you.
No, he never said that. Just kidding.
I used to work at a theater, and like people would bring their little kids in to see Chucky, and like I understand, like as an adult you can see that ironically, but as a kid I just would look at them and go, what are you doing?
Your toys are all alive and they want to murder you.
It's horrible.
I didn't watch any horror movies when I was a kid. I mean, again, I could take something that was friendly and pervert it into something evil like E.T. I didn't need the, you know what I mean?
Well, it makes me think, are we just, that's going to happen? It's all relative. Like, you're going to be afraid as a kid.
Yeah.
I wonder.
What do you attach it to?
Well, that's the thing. It's like in Return of the Jedi, speaking of which, like my dad wouldn't let me watch the Rancor attack. I was 4 when the movie came out. And so that was one where I was like, oh my God, it's so much worse. I thought it was so much worse than it was. And I had the toy. I had the picture books.
Wow.
So I kind of knew what that scene was, but I didn't really watch it probably until it came out on home video. And then I was like, well, this doesn't scare me at all, you know? And like when I saw Aliens, I saw Alien and Aliens Pretty. That was like the first rated R movies that I watched. And I was like, oh, these guys don't scare me. And my dad was like, my dad literally goes, I will show you these, just don't get nightmares. And I was like, okay,
Great setup.
That's not how this works. And then I remember,
Don't get nightmares.
and then we're watching it, and he's like, is it scary to you? I was like, actually, no. I literally remember going, I'm more scared of E.T. than these guys. So I think I learned later, I was like, oh, the stuff that's designed to be scary is fun. It's the stuff that's innocent that turns evil. So Chucky, I would not have been able to handle. That was just
interesting.
That was making that movie for me.
I look at Halloween now because I'm rewatching them, and it's crystal clear to me that though these movies carry a lot of weight with me, people watching them, young people now watching them, see them the way I saw Frankenstein and Dracula. Like those are campy, almost boring and insignificant kind of things. I appreciate them now, but at the time you're just like, oh, a Dracula, a Frankenstein, a Michael, a Jason. They're classic movie monsters now. They carry no like fear or weight over these.
But they did.
Oh God!
At the time, they must have because they were so huge.
They did. I can speak to that personally.
Right.
Yeah, of course. They did.
Well, and even though I'm not talking about the classic Universal monsters.
Yeah, right.
They had to.
Oh, yeah.
I just recently rewatched, I think it was last year at Halloween, I watched all of those. And I got to say, the Invisible Man is fucking hilarious.
Really? I've never seen it. No.
Oh, it's great. The character's such a bastard. And all he's doing is just like being really rude and like kicking people's chairs over. And I mean, he's a menace to society, but it's also like, his like attitude and his like tone, it's really funny. Like you're like, I kind of like this guy. He's hilarious, but it's just this dude being a dick to an entire town. We're like all trying to capture him, and he's always like getting one up on them. It's So funny. You have to watch. It's such an, and the old school special effects in it hold up. They're pretty great.
Some of those,
So I highly recommend the original Invisible Man movie. There's one other thing you said something, and I'm trying to remember.
I was just thinking, I wonder like what's carrying that weight now? Like what is the scary thing?
Good question.
Now.
Oh,
I don't think I know.
For kids?
Yeah, like what is it?
I think it's it was like
Who's the new Jason?
10 years ago it was like Slender Man. It was like creepypasta. I think
internet.
It's like internet thing.
I think
Broken out
internet
from
stuff is like
mainstream media.
I read the story and I don't know if it's true or not. That kind of stuff probably scares kids.
That's probably true. Yeah, Slender Man. I'm scared of Slender Man. That's some scary shit.
Yeah. Well,
that's not real, but like maybe.
Yeah. But again, that's an example of like a meme that carried over into real life with those girls,
right?
That stabbed their friend, and fortunately, that she lived.
Yeah.
But like, that's what I mean. It's like I'm just surprised more people aren't putting on Michael Myers masks.
Yeah.
Is it true that it's
stop saying that?
Is it true that it's William Shatner's face cast?
That's the first
true,
and
correct?
second movie, yeah.
Okay.
So it's from an actual Don Post Star Trek Captain Kirk mask, store-bought Captain Kirk mask. They ripped the eyebrows off, painted it white, I think stretched it a little, tweaked the hair, and that's the mask. And then in the second one, it's the same mask, but it had kind of like deteriorated, so it looks a little different. And then it gets changed from there on out. But yeah, and you can still, like certain shots in the first movie, you kind of get a like William Shatner vibe from it, and it's really odd.
That is great.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen Halloween 3. The one that has nothing to do with any of it.
Yeah.
I really want to see that.
It's worth watching. It's a real anomaly, and it's really fun and camp. There's a real like new appreciation for it. It's not great.
Yeah.
But I like watching it a lot.
Yeah. Did Carpenter produce that? Not direct it, correct?
Yeah. He did a polish on the script, I believe, too.
Okay.
Yeah, he did not direct it.
I got to see it. It's still, as of this recording, Halloween season for us. So maybe
That's
I will watch it. Okay. We have a game we like to play with our guests.
Lovely.
This is a hodgepodge list that our listeners know what I'm talking about. We just came out of our Halloween run where I tweaked this list, and now I'm sort of putting it back together. So it's going to be a little mix and match. This isn't, listeners, this will not be the final list, but I'm working on a new one. So here we go. This is called Bullshit
or Believe It.
So
I am soundly in.
Great. So I'm going to list a bunch of stuff. If you believe it, say believe it. If it's bullshit, you say bullshit. If you're somewhere in between, you got to still use one of those words.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So Matt Gourley.
Yeah.
On your mark.
Yeah.
Get set. Ghosts.
Bullshit.
UFOs.
Bullshit.
Bigfoot.
Bullshit.
Out-of-body experiences.
Big bullshit.
Alien visitations.
Bullshit.
Alien abductions.
Bullshit.
Loch Ness Monster.
Bullshit.
Mothman.
Bullshit.
Reincarnation.
Bullshit.
ESP.
Bullshit.
Haunted houses.
Bullshit.
Bermuda Triangle.
Bullshit.
The Lizard Man of Scape or Swamp.
Bullshit.
Skunk Ape.
Don't know, but bullshit.
Heaven.
Bullshit.
Hell.
Bullshit.
Demons.
Bullshit.
Angels.
Bullshit.
Chupacabra.
Bullshit.
Bat Squatch.
Bullshit.
Life on other planets.
Believe.
The multiverse.
Believe.
World peace.
Would love to believe.
Michael Myers.
Believe.
Well done. A lot of bullshit.
Yeah, boy, I really outed myself.
No, that's great.
okay.
It's fun. As Bryce, this is the point where if Bryce were here, he'd yell at me and say that the list sucks. Because he only likes it when people say believe it. He's like, this list, you need to keep working on.
Don't put in Lizard Man.
You have to keep working on that. Yeah, he gets mad when I put in Lizard Man. That's why I kept it. So you're not, no thought towards believing in UFOs.
No, here's the thing. I actually guess I believe it's conceivably true. Because I think it's scientifically likely that there's life on other planets or other galaxies at least. But I guess what I mean by that, because we had to pick one, is I think it's entirely possible. Anything I've ever seen or read about someone's encounter with it has seemed more likely explained by the science of people looking for reasons or having hallucinations. Like, I just don't believe them as credible. I don't believe the person.
Okay.
I believe of its possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
You just don't think, you haven't heard enough evidence to make you come out of that camp.
No, and I've never seen any concrete evidence ever.
Right.
Like, I think there'd be no reason to pull that stuff back at this point.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when you hear, and it sounds like you should listen to this podcast because I feel like there's 100 stories we've done that might help change your mind.
Okay.
But
Also might not at all.
yeah, it might not at all.
Just throwing that out
Just
there.
also might not. But if someone you trusted were to come to you and say your wife, and said, I just saw a fucking classic flying saucer fly over the house, lights glowing. I don't know what it was, but that's what it looked like. What would you, I know this is writing on a big hypothetical,
Yeah.
but like, how would you explain that away?
I wouldn't try to prove her wrong, but I would just say, like, there's so many other possibilities it could be, chief among them just a hallucination. Like,
Right.
that just seems more likely to me than aliens actually flying a craft across our house.
Right.
Because it also just doesn't seem like a spaceship of some kind is going to really be the way. That seems like an old sci-fi sense of how
Yes.
aliens are going to come here. It seems like
Yeah.
it would be more, I'd be more inclined to believe aliens like shifted in interdimensionally.
Well, we're big
Okay.
fans of that.
Well,
over
now
here.
I'm listening.
Yeah. Big
Which is,
fans.
that's why I kind of hesitate on, I had to pick believe or not believe, but that just seems like a more likely way for it to happen.
What about the theory that some of these UFOs or aliens are actually us from the distant future?
Oh, I mean, that's fascinating.
Wouldn't that be cool?
And they're like, you're trying to warn yourself about something?
Or
Or
they're
just like, good job today.
Well, if
Or they're just trying to catch Nixon in the
yeah, they're like,
Oh, no.
when is Dick and Pat? When are they performing? But you could go. I just think if we could go back in time and look at the dinosaurs, we would.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I have a feeling they're like, let's go back and see what was going on in the 20th or any of these centuries. And maybe that the alien grays, the traditional little skinny bodies with big heads, maybe that's what we evolve into,
Yeah.
1,000 or not 1,000, but, a couple million years down the road or 6 million years down the road.
It's a super fascinating theory. And I have hallucinated myself in a sense where I've had a Michael Myers nightmare. I wake up and I look in the hallway and there's Michael Myers.
Wow.
And it's just like a half, I'm in my half waking sleep. Michael Myers is not in my hallway,
Right.
but I'm seeing him. And yet half of my brain is going, it's not real, but my subconscious, that's the thing that's more fascinating to me is like the subconscious of, and your brain alone, how we have a brain, but we can't really control our brain, and we don't even really know how our brain works. And isn't that the crazy opposite of what a brain should be?
Yeah.
Like the most amazing organ in your entire body, and indeed, like on the earth, as far as we know, can't figure itself out.
Yeah.
That seems strangely like what's locking that door, or it's just really interesting.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I was reading an article while researching the story that we're going to get into in a moment, but they were talking about how, and I'm paraphrasing the fuck out of this, so I apologize, but they were talking about how a lot of that stuff, scientists think that when we see things like that, or we attribute personality and intention to things that move. So if you hear a twig break in the woods, you're like, something is coming, something's stepping on it, because it's our primal brain.
Yeah, kept us alive.
That is keeping us alive, and it's trying to rule out what's a threat and what's not a threat. So we will create imaginary predators to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And so the article used example, and this is from I believe this was from Slate.com, but it brings up the example of like if you see a leaf blowing in the air and you mistake it for a UFO, there's no ill to come out of going, other than maybe sounding crazy, going like, oh, there's a danger there.
Right.
But if you were to see a UFO and go, oh, that's safe, and then it fires a beam at you
Yeah.
and you die, then your brain hasn't helped you out in that situation.
Yeah, I
You know
think
what
it's truly the reason we're here today is we have that instinct. So
Yeah.
by and large, it's a really good thing, right?
So especially when you're out in nature where a lot of this stuff happens, people will attribute, perceived threats to help just your reptile brain or whatever keeping you safe. But
I think also with that too is that it assigns like a sort of a story and a sense of order to things.
Yes.
And that's like why people get so into conspiracy theories, because it at least makes them feel like someone's in charge.
Yeah, or there's this, something's making sense when it doesn't.
Yeah, when the opposite is actually like the most terrifying thing is like, no, it's all just meaningless chaos.
It is.
You live and then you die.
I know.
It's like no, there's a cabal of blood drinking pedophiles that are reptile people.
Right. Well, and
it's not chaos.
It brings it all full circle to like, that makes me understand why people are like, let's join a church.
I know.
Let's have something to let's anchor our reality in some narrative. Because I do have to say that, for as much anxiety as religion caused me as a child, sometimes life was easier when I could like just go, hey, God, can you take care of me, please?
I had the same thing. And I went through a real long period of transitioning away from that to kind of embracing the fact that there's no guarantees and there's no way to know. But the peace that I found, and I mean like relative peace, was that, there is no guarantees. It's not really on me. I obviously have to take responsibility for my own reactions. I don't mean that in like a nihilistic way, but that you don't have to worry too much because you can't possibly conceive of the things that are going to come your way. And so there was a little bit of a release of like, okay, I can worry about what I can worry about, but other than that, I don't have to be existentially full of dread. Because who knows?
Yeah.
It felt like a little bit of a reprieve, like I was let off the hook a little bit.
Yeah, you're not in charge, Matt.
No way, I am sure not.
Just take care of yourself as best you can, take care of the people you love, and that's all you can do. Because a real fucking knife twist is when something terrible does happen and you are religious. You're like, why would God do this to me?
And then you sit there justifying it.
You have to pack it. It's like it's either a trial, a punishment, or or you go, well, there's no God if this is possible. Then, you know what I mean? Then you have a real crisis. So I think, your attitude almost sounds a little bit more Buddhist, of that like non-attachment to things and being able to be like, it's all open season. Everything's on the table. So don't attach or attribute too much connection to at least your own control over it, because you can't, that's when you do really suffer.
Yeah, I guess that's nice. I feel like that's a compliment to say it's Buddhism, because I mean maybe cosmically I'm kind of that way personally.
Well, I was going to say I'm Buddhist now, so I want you to come to my church.
Gosh,
he's got a tiny couch for you guys.
I said I'm cosmically Buddhist.
I have one chair that I squeeze my wife and I into. With you. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I don't even know what I was going to say. Like, I just personally, my wife and I have learned to like take this great solace in our own time and personal life together. So as silly as it sounds, we'll wake up in the morning, we'll have coffee, we read the newspaper, we put a little music on, we try not to get right to work, and we just kind of have try to have a peaceful morning. Yeah. And if I have anything that's a heaven, that's it. And the cat comes and sits in my lap, and it sounds so stupid.
No, it sounds so nice.
But it is just a moment of, oh wait, it really is like, if there's a heaven, it's getting rid of complications and just these little peaceful moments. I'm sure that's age too, but it means more than anything.
I think you're right. And if Bryce were here, he would agree with you 100%. He always says, Bryce always says, when it comes to the bullshitter believer, he goes, heaven is a place on earth. Hell, it's a place on earth. It's just a state
I
of
believe
mind.
that. Yeah.
All right. Well,
I'm with you, Bryce.
Yeah, we're all with you, Bryce. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness. I think you're going to like this one.
I'm excited.
All right, we're back with Matt Gourley, Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast. And this week for High Strangeness, I wanted to pick something that a native Californian might know about. I don't know. Maybe has even been to the place that we're going to discuss. Are you familiar with Mount Shasta in Northern California?
I'm familiar of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't even remember if I've ever been there. I don't think so.
I've been there. I was there on a road trip a couple of years ago. Maybe we'll talk about it after this segment. But it's a beautiful place, and it is full of mystery.
Ooh.
So tonight, we're talking about the mysteries of Mount Shasta. Lonely as God and white as a winter moon, Mount Shasta starts up sudden and solitary from the heart of the great black forests of Northern California. It's a quote from Joaquin Miller, poet and explorer.
Only as God. Wow.
Mystical Mount Shasta is located in the Cascade Mountain Range in Siskiyou County in Northern California. Reaching 14,179 feet high, this gorgeous peak is often surrounded by lenticular, flying saucer-shaped clouds, and is home to more than 100 different spiritual sects and 29 New Age businesses. It's a place that writer Brent Swancer from Mysterious Universe called dripping with high strangeness. I'm going to show you a photo of one of these lenticular clouds over Mount Shasta.
That's incredible.
I mean, it looks like there are... this happens a lot, and it looks like there are just giant UFO motherships over the mountain. It's a beautiful place. So, a lot of this segment was sourced from a lot of this came from that really great article on Mysterious Universe by Brent Swancer, Slate Magazine, Wikipedia, and various other websites. And we're just really gonna just get to the tip of the mountain on this one. I thought this might be a bit of a cakewalk. This Mount Shasta business is crazy town. So, legends of Mount Shasta go back centuries. The Modoc, Wintu, Atchewami, and Atsuwagi tribes have all at one point, and the Klamath people, all at one point claimed that the land surrounding Mount Shasta as their home, and the mountain was considered by all to be a sacred place, an enchanted land inhabited by small beings, strange lights, powerful spirits, and more. For some, Mount Shasta was a kind of heaven on earth, but populated by entities and inhabited with powers that are too strong for human residency. To walk up the mountain past the tree line was often considered to spell doom for unsuspecting travelers and hikers. The Modocs believed Shasta was the landing point for the sky god of above world, Skell, who would throw molten rocks at his enemy, Lao, the sun or the god of the below world, who lived inside of Mount Masma in Oregon. And the tradition of powerful entities living inside the Great Mountain continues to this very day. So Mount Shasta is a dormant volcano. It has erupted, they said, I forget the exact number of times, but the last time that it erupted was in the 1700s. Oh. So it's possible that the native peoples and indigenous tribes would see this volcano erupt from time to time, and of course that was Skell, the god of above world, showing his anger. So in the late 1870s, when he was just 13 years old, writer and future New Age spiritualist Frederick Spencer Oliver was staking a claim while prospecting with his family below Mount Shasta when his hand began to shake and tremble violently. Frederick demanded pen and paper and ran home automatic writing and sat in his cabin writing and writing and writing, claiming that he was channeling messages by a being named Philos, who lived in a holy city under Mount Shasta that he called Telos. Philos and his people, according to Spencer, were survivors of the lost continent of Lemuria, a fabled land that was thought by some to exist between Madagascar and India, which would explain why lemurs were found in both places.
I didn't know about the lemur connection.
Yeah, it's named. There was a naturalist who was trying to figure out how they had lemurs in India and Madagascar, and theorized that there must have been a land bridge at one point that he called Lemuria. It was a hypothetical continent, and it has connections to Atlantis as well.
Right? Yeah,
and, so it's another one of these subterranean lost continents.
I was gonna say that sounds like Atlantis.
It
theory.
is, and I think that this guy, the whole lemur thing, was sort of an offhand comment, but it really struck a chord with the New Age people, and this is where it sort of began. So, for years, Frederick Spencer Oliver would channel Philos, who gave him visions of a beautiful, advanced city that existed inside the mountain, populated by tall, ethereal, slender beings who could move objects with their minds and flew in and out of the mountain in flying cigar-shaped ships. Published by Frederick's mother after his death in 1905, A Dweller on Two Planets chronicles the story of the Lemurians living inside Mount Shasta and sparked a century-long New Age movement. In the book, Oliver writes of amazing technology that the Lemurians wielded, which included televisions, air conditioning, holograms, and cellular phones, all from the perspective of a young man living in the late 1800s. So it's cool. He said that Philos and his people had survived the extinction event in Lemuria and traveled centuries ago to California, and then they built their city under Mount Shasta, and they live there to this day. And locals even talk about seeing beings in white robes coming down to and shopping among the people who live in Mount Shasta. But it's great because all this stuff, it's kind of like this great, it's considered by some to be true. It's kind of like this Joseph Smith stuff, or that a lot of Scientology. This idea of in the turn of the century, there were all these people that were sort of science fiction writers and also channelists who were getting visions by enlightened beings, they claimed. And Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, was one of these people. He claimed that he had seen Thelos in his, I believe, his astral projections. But it's fascinating that a lot of the tech that he claims that he saw is stuff that became very modern in the second half of the 20th century. There's also there are stories of the Octavians, who are another race of enlightened beings that are said to use the power of sound waves to manipulate reality. The I Am movement was a big spiritual sect that grew from the legends of Mount Shasta. Theosophist Guy Ballard was hiking along Mount Shasta in the early 30s when he claimed to come across the Ascended Master Saint Germain, or the Comte de Saint Germain, who we discussed with Bryce 2 episodes back. This is a figure that pops up in New Age texts. He's supposedly lived for centuries, and he's considered to be an ascended master by some, a vampire by others. But Saint Germain and other ascended masters began regularly communicating with Guy and his wife Edna Ann Wheeler Ballard, and they published their teachings and assembled the Ascended Masters Teachings religious movement. By the late 1930s, the I Am movement, AM for Ascended Masters, boasted 1 million followers before eventually dwindling after Guy Ballard's death in 1942. However, the New Age movement still exists nationally, and visitors can still visit the St. Germain Reading Room in Mount Shasta. And this, I wanted to quote directly from the article that I read from Mysterious Universe, because this is just too insane. And they're writing about the Lemurians, and this is Brent Swancer writes, although the Lemurians of Mount Shasta are generally seen to be benevolent and nonviolent, the same cannot be said of the truly outlandish tale of what were known as the Deros, short for degenerate robots, which were said
my favorite kind.
I know, which were said to be Lemurian robots, which had gone insane and become malevolent machines bent on murder, mayhem, and destruction. Whoa. The Darrow's tale was popularized in the 1940s by a Richard Shaver. Again, there's old Dick Shaver, who used to write for Amazing Stories with Ray Palmer.
Oh, wow.
Shaver believed them to be the source of all of mankind's woes. As completely absurd as this may all sound, there was an interesting story related by researcher and author David Paulides. Again, another Bryce Johnson favorite.
All that greatest hits here.
It's all coming together. About a young child who went missing while on a camping trip with his parents on the mountain in 2011. The boy apparently suddenly disappeared without a trace and was not found for 5 hours, after which the shaken child came back with an extremely weird story to tell. According to him, he had been abducted by an evil robot that had looked and sounded just like his grandmother, and taken to a huge underground cave populated by other human-looking robots, as well as giant spiders, because why not?
Why not, yeah. Evil robot grandma.
You're a kid. Come on. You get
the
to
real grandmother later claimed to have woken up face down on the ground, feeling violently ill, and with a small puncture wound on the back of her neck, presumably so that the robot could steal the genetic information it would need to duplicate her. I mean, this is insane stuff. We've got tall ethereal white beings, cigar-like crafts, Yoctavians who are moving things with sound waves, and now evil robots living on the mountain.
Sounds pretty good. Also, the Nova, the dog, is just at times staring at me like a human, and with this music, which is happening live and is amazing, by the way.
Thanks.
I'm having my own spiritual experience over here. This dog is bewitching me.
Yes, he will communicate with you telepathically. Just wait for the message.
Oh my God.
So, of course, we need to talk about the UFOs around Mount Shasta.
Okay.
Shasta is said to be said to rest upon the crossroads of powerful ley lines, making it an epicenter for powerful energy vortices and enchanted healing waters. Oliver wrote about the Lemurians' flying ships, and indeed, Shasta is a hotbed for UFO activity. Not only have strange lights and crafts been seen flying above Mount Shasta, witnesses have even claimed to see reddish-green lights emanating from within the mountain itself. I found a report on NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center, from February of 2015. And this is from an eyewitness who's an airline captain. He says, I'm an airline captain. My co-pilot and I were on our way from LAX to PDX at flight 380, and we were in the Mount Shasta area. It was a smooth flight, and very little ATC communications were going on. We decided to look out and up at the night sky for falling stars and or satellites passing overhead. We were heading about 310 degrees and our 2 o'clock high, maybe 50 degrees up from the horizon, I noticed 2 brighter than normal stars, and mentioned to my co-pilot that I didn't remember ever seeing those 2 stars that were brighter than the surrounding stars in the background. The 2 lights were approximately an inch apart in the windscreen and the size of normal stars. Just as I said that, one of the stars just dimmed out over about a 10-second time span, followed by the other one dimming out completely in about 10 seconds also. The stars, now obviously lights, were not in motion. They were not satellites and they were not falling stars. They were as stationary as the stars in the background. We were flying in crystal clear skies and were not flying through any clouds whatsoever. These 2 lights were not following the typical west to east orbital path as most satellites do, and were just sitting there, kind of like ships hiding in plain sight. The altitude of the lights appeared to be outside of the atmosphere. We were flying at 38,000 feet, approximately 7 miles up, and these were at least 100,000 feet up. The thing was, they were extremely bright and not moving. Mankind does not have craft that can fly at that altitude and not be moving. Speculation surrounding Mount Shasta and UFOs purports that its summit might be a popular refueling station for alien craft, or that Shasta is a portal to another dimension, or a gateway to the hollow earth, where the pilots of said mysterious crafts are rumored to dwell. perhaps Lemurians do exist after all. Shasta is also a stomping ground for this podcast's very own mascot, Bigfoot. And many believers say that the Sasquatch that inhabits the shadows of the mountain can cross between dimensions and materialize out of thin air. This is an encounter that I found from BigfootEncounters.com. 2 identified gentlemen reported that they had seen a Bigfoot while drinking beer in the Bunny Flats campground. They said the Bigfoot had come out of the forest, knocking off a branch at the 9-foot level, and the Sasquatch allegedly gave them a crystal and went back into the woods.
Oh man, I want that to happen so badly. That is the best camping trip ever.
And Bigfoot tracks were found above the 8,000 foot level when this guy went out to investigate. In 1976, a logger by the name of Virgil Lawson and his partner Pat Conway encountered a 7-foot-tall, hairy, black matted fur-covered Sasquatch that smelled like a half-rotten bear. It looked at the loggers for a while before running off into the woods. They went to get their gun, and when they came back, it was gone. But they could smell that rotten, squatchy stink.
Squatchy.
So whether you believe in all of the legends surrounding Mount Shasta or not, its draw is undeniable. Today, it is a beacon for both hikers and hippies, and home to a spiritual movement that continues well into the future. And that is just the tip of Mount Shasta and the mystery surrounding it. I love this place. It's super crazy. I love all the lore around it.
Have you been there?
I have. I went there in I would say it's been over 10 years ago. It was probably mid 2000s. I was on a road trip up to Vancouver, where I was filming a show at the time, and a friend who was riding with me, we stopped there, and it's near the town Mount Shasta and the mountain are near another town called Weed, and this is before we had legalized marijuana here in California. We're like, well, let's go get some weed and weed. You know, we just figured it would be a funny thing to do.
Yeah.
And you pull over, and immediately you stop. The first gas station you stop at, it's just full of Bigfoot T-shirts and all this stuff. And I was like, "Oh, dude, this is cool." So we started doing a little light Googling and found out that Mount Shasta was apparently a portal to another dimension, the Hollow Earth, and all this stuff. And that's when I first started hearing about all of these things. So we went to Mount Shasta, and we stopped at this Stage Door. I think it was called the Stage Door Saloon. And we were told if we hung out there long enough, a guy would come in, we'd know him when we saw him, and we could buy weed from him. And so we sat there, and then this dude who just looked like your textbook
Bigfoot.
Stoner hippie Bigfoot.
It was Bigfoot.
Well, yeah.
I got these crystals, and
The guy smelled like
pretty good weed.
rotting bear meat. Came in, and we were like, "Are you the guy?" He's like, "Yep." He's like, $50, I'll be back in a half hour. And we're like, okay. So we just handed this guy money.
Wait, you handed him and he left? You didn't wait for him to come back with it?
No, he said he'd be back. I don't remember what happened, but we waited. And sure enough, he came back. This guy had like bright blue. This guy had like bright
hippies.
blue dreads. You know, we were just like, this is the dude.
Yeah.
And he like wandered out of the woods, and he had this bag of just the biggest, most beautiful bud I've ever seen. And we smoked that stuff driving. Oh God, it was really, really, really good. It was really good. But yeah, there's a bunch of like new age. There's like crystal shops there, and you know, like lots of there's like the rainbow room, you know, like rainbow reading room or something like that. You know, there's like all this stuff, but it's also very like mountain prospecting town too. So you have this like cross between like old prospecty vibe, prospector vibes, and like hippie stuff and new age cult, you know, stuff. But it's gorgeous. The mountain is beautiful.
That area up there is my favorite topography on the planet.
The best.
I mean, basically like Endor. It's just
it really
gorgeous.
is.
Yeah.
And this is a little west. This is off like the 5 freeway. And this mountain is kind of like where this part of Northern California that's it is forested, but it's also like a little bit more desolate. And then this just huge mountain is right there on the Cascade Range, just like heading up towards Mount St. Helens and stuff. It's very close to the Oregon border. But boy, oh boy, oh boy. I mean, it is prime Bigfoot country, and it is just a magical place. I see why, like Sedona, Arizona. Have you ever been to
No.
Sedona?
Mm-mm.
Another place where it's supposed to be a lot of ley lines and energy vortices, and you see why it is just a magical place and why it would have so many stories. But you go into I could have gone down this is such a rabbit hole to go down, but there are just all these weird stories of people encountering or disappearing, and people claiming that they like just all these vanishings all in that area. It's very, very, very strange. You can see lots of videos of weird craft flying over Mount Shasta, and I don't know, it's a cool spot. And I was like, I wanted to do a California place.
Yeah, I appreciate
for a native
that.
Californian. You should go check it out sometime.
Any trip excuse to go up there. This is funny that we're talking UFOs too, because I have 2 creative projects in my life right now are basically UFO based.
Really?
And just like feels like the zeitgeist is kind of
It definitely is.
Yeah.
UFOs are trending.
Yeah, they're back.
Yeah.
What do you think? What the hell is that? What do you think's up with Mount Shasta? Why is it such a mecca for weird stuff?
I think, if you're asking me, it just sounds like oral history passed down and what's the word? Not exaggerated, but added to, and the fun.
Heightened.
Like, it seems like it'd be fun to tell those stories and have those experiences, and it's hard for me to believe, but I love to hear it.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I love that. Because there's a lot of general UFO kind of lore and stuff, but I love one that's specific to a place and has literal characters.
Yeah.
Like, that's great.
That's what's so cool about it is sort of like a cross between, and I haven't read that Dweller on Two Planets. I'm going to, obviously now, but it is kind of cool that it's sort of a cross section of folklore, theosophy, New Age religion, and just science fiction. And it's so cool that like California is a place where a lot of that stuff, we've given birth to so many weird like religions, I don't know. I don't want to say I don't know, but
that's true. Well, like Pentecostalism comes from California,
it's
and Los Angeles even.
And Scientology and all this stuff that we're talking about. There were all these like New Age spiritualist movements out here around the turn of the century. There's like the Croatoan Society near where I live in Hollywood, which was like they tried to build a New Age utopia in the Hollywood Hills and failed in the 1920s because I'm sure too many people started swapping wives. But then there's also the Vedanta Church or Vedanta Church in my neighborhood. And like Aldous Huxley used to go there and meditate, and it's sort of like a cross between. I'm not even sure if it's Hinduism or Buddhism. It's a sort of a cross of all of that New Age stuff as well. So there is this like, I don't know, there was something about California. I think like people came out here in the 20s and 30s, and they were just like, let's start over.
Yeah, and the land, it's got to make you feel like you're free, and it makes you feel spiritual. I feel that anytime I go up to Big Sur or something and just see, I feel like I'm in Japan or something.
Well, there's stories that I found of like Lemurians coming into town and buying things with like gold nuggets, like solid gold nuggets. So there's this other thing of like gold being a precious metal, and like gold being underground that a lot of these like legends come from as well. But it's almost like you hear people talk about it. They're like, oh yeah, that's the Lemurians. They're up in the mountain doing their thing.
Like they might as well be saying like, that's like the fundamentalist Mormons.
Yeah. It's just
they keep to themselves, and
it's cool that there's like this folklore of like an ancient like civilization living under a mountain in California. I love it.
That the Lemurians are like the most quintessentially California aliens too. They just have like crystals and robes and long hair.
They're super surfery.
They're really chilled out.
Apparently they have like a walnut-sized organ that pops out of their forehead, out of their third eye, and then that's what they can move things around with.
Oh God.
It's really, guys, it's very weird stuff, and I'm sorry I'm only giving you guys the Cliff Notes version, but...
Have I talked about the Source family at all and my connection to that?
You have a connection to that?
Maybe you've mentioned it.
Yeah. So it's funny because it's connected to this. My Source, I'm a member of the Source family.
Oh, I think
officially,
I do know this.
I'm in the cult. I mean, it's no longer active, but I was like initiated by one of the early members.
God.
But so my source family name is Telos Aquarian, after the Lemurian city in Mount Shasta.
Whoa.
So
and Telos, I got to look
connect.
it up. It's a Latin word. Do you remember what it stands for, Riley?
I honestly don't. But I was pretty stoked when I was given the name.
I think it stands for like, it means passage.
I have a cult connection myself. I own David Koresh's guitar.
Shut up.
That's true.
That's insane.
It's a 78 Ibanez musician. And I just bought it at this vintage store, and they said, oh, by the way, that was owned by David Koresh. We didn't want to tell anybody until after the sale. So,
whoa, weird.
There's no like documentary evidence or anything like that.
But why would they make that up?
I don't know. And it had like in the case, there's a like sticker with the handwritten name David Koresh in there. And
well, I mean, that's pretty legit.
That's what a collector's corner segment that could be.
Yeah, I know. Bizarre collector's item.
That is, whoa.
I mean, there must be photos of him with the guitar
I've
somewhere,
looked and looked. I've never found
it.
And how did you come across it?
I bought it as a used guitar at a vintage store. It was actually at a Sam Ash, but this one in Orange County had like a special vintage annex. It was like a separate kind of, I don't know if it was like if it was them directly or someone, like it was some kind of partnership thing.
Right.
And then, what was I gonna? Oh, so he apparently owned it and left it behind in San Francisco when he moved to Waco. Okay. And it was his roommate. Like, I guess he left and just left a bunch of shit behind, and his roommate came down to LA and sold it.
Yeah. It does seem like
Imagine
Koresh
being
would
that
just
roommate.
like
That's so
dump
weird.
his roommate with all his shit. He's like, this guy fucking left all his stuff here.
Yeah.
That is
he probably took his wife.
Yeah.
Left his guitar.
Wow. Telos, by the way, means an ultimate object or aim.
Righteous. Into it. But yeah, so the Source family was a cult is a strong word, but it was a cult. It was a cult.
Yeah,
in
there's
the
a documentary
60s.
about them.
Yeah, there's a great documentary about it. Although some of the Source people don't all necessarily agree with the documentary.
I'm sure. Yeah,
you know, it's one version of the story.
The cult members don't like the documentary about the cult.
I know, it's a shocker, but yeah, it was like this like really kind of. It started out super dreamy and idealistic, and they opened the first, I think, vegan or vegetarian restaurant on Sunset Boulevard back in the '60s, and they were all working there.
Right.
They had a band called Yehovah 13 that the cult leader was the lead singer of the band.
Of course he was.
And they would go as you would, and they would go to like the high schools and like recruit hippies back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm friends with the guy who was the guitar player in the band, and now he's like this old hippie, and he lives up in Shasta.
Oh man, of course.
He's a great character, and so he'll indoctrinate people into the Source family that he meets, you know, just to keep the spirit alive. Yeah. So I was like, yes, I definitely want an aquarium.
Dude, that's so great. Well, that wraps up another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, guys. Matt, Gourley, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a delight. Thank you for sharing your Sunday afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to plug? Mention?
Well, you can check out In Myers We Trust with Paul Rust and myself, and Superego, the podcast, is out now, which is kind of improvised character stuff, but then, you know, tightened up so it doesn't waste too much of your time.
And we have two former guests are on that show, Mark McConville, and Paul F. Tompkins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, McConnell. So that's great. Definitely check out anything that Matt's involved in. You should definitely check out. Watch the new season of Robot Chicken. The episodes that I worked on have aired by this point, so definitely check that out. And also, remember to set your DVRs for Bryce's new show, Expedition Bigfoot, which is coming out on the Travel Channel in December. I think originally it was November, now it's been pushed to December.
I think
so
that's correct, yeah.
I don't know too much information about it, but we're super excited that we can finally talk about that project. And
Good thing he's not here now. Yeah, we can finally talk about it.
He'll be back next week, and we're going to be I'm sure we're going to be talking about it a lot in the months to come.
For sure.
Riley, where can people find you?
At Trashbag hashtag for my monthly photo of garbage on the internet.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, that's good. So I'm McMills on all this stuff. Please, a couple things. If you want to support the show, you can do that a couple ways. Number one, go to Bigfoot Collectors Club, The Other Side, over on patreon.com. For just $5 a month, you can unlock multiple bonus reward episodes. Or if you don't want to join that, but you want to support the show, go check out our TeePublic shop. Mm-hmm. Pick up one of our numerous cool T-shirts there. You'll look good doing it. And then I guess that's it. Till next time, I remain Michael McMillan for Bryce Johnson, Riley Bray. Thanks again to Matt Gourley, and until next week, good night.
And go get regressed.
Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Sun Eaters, courtesy of Lotus Pool Records. Subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. To support the show, check out our Patreon feed, BCC, The Other Side, at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple bonus episodes every month.